Thanks so much for staying with us here on the AM Report. A warm welcome to you if you've just tuned in. I'm Michelle Craig. Other news we're tracking for you this morning: former President Jacob Zuma and his co-accused French arms company Thales are back in court today. Pre-trial issues will be heard before the trial is expected to get underway in February next year. Now, Thales wants the NPA to set aside racketeering charges against it. Other pre-trial issues include a request for particulars from the state and clarity on COVID-19 international travel. Now, the matter is well over a decade in the making and is expected to go on trial after several failed applications for a stay of prosecution, both by former President Zuma and by Thales itself. The former president is accused of pocketing bribes during the arms procurement deal between 1998 and 1999. He faces 16 charges, including racketeering, fraud, corruption, and money laundering. Now, Hennie Van Vuuren is one of the arms deal whistleblowers and activists. He joins us now via our video line. Hennie, good morning. Always great to talk to you. But it does seem that you and I are talking more and more about the trial getting underway, the fact that it's about to get underway, and yet that February deadline now looks like it won't be met either for the trial to get underway.
Morning, Michelle. I think absolutely. I think this is of great concern. It's been a slow, lingering process, and as you rightly say, it's been a process that's been underway for more than 10 years, 15 years since the allegations of corruption involving Thales and former President, then Deputy President Jacob Zuma first surfaced. And this is clearly part of a strategy as well. I think we need to understand from the side of the defense team, and we need to appreciate that it's a strategy that works in lockstep between the French or European arms company Thales and Mr. Zuma, that where the one succeeds, the other succeeds, if you like.
Yeah.
Thales is able to delay the process if they are able to bring what they are doing now and attempt to undo the racketeering charge. They delay the entire process, and that of course plays into the hands of Mr. Zuma's interests as well. So it isn't a question of justice only moving slowly. It is also a very, I think, well-considered legal strategy between Thales and Jacob Zuma that's at play here.
So how do you reckon this is going to play out, Hennie? The fact that Thales now wants the NPA to set aside that raft of racketeering charges against it. I mean, what are some of the considerations there that the NPA would have to make in making, or that the court would have to make in that decision?
Yeah, I think that the primary issue that Thales has raised is their relationship, amongst others, with Shabir Sheikh, who was both Mr. Zuma's financial advisor, but was himself obviously also an arms dealer in the 1990s and has been found guilty of a range of criminal offences more than a decade ago now, in the mid-2000s. And so this is a matter that they want tested in court, and therefore what the racketeering charge thrown out. I think that the state does have a strong argument. They've got a strong legal team that's been working on this matter for 16, 17 years, led by Advocate Billy Downer. There is, of course, a concern, and I would imagine this was part of the strategy on the side of Thales and Jacob Zuma, not only to slow this process down and to bog it down into the weeds. They're also mindful of the fact that Billy Downer at some stage, he's whether or not he would retire from the NPA, and I think there's a desire to grind everything to a halt so that the people who have the real institutional memory of this case effectively peel off. And that, of course, is a danger. So I think it's incredibly important that the NPA remains, in the interest of justice at least, remains energetic in pursuing these charges to ensure that it is brought to trial. I'm not suggesting, therefore, that Mr. Zuma or Thales must be found guilty. But certainly every attempt has been made to ensure that this isn't being brought to trial. And that, again, to bring it back to, the earlier point, is consistent with Mr. Zuma's Stalingrad strategy and that his legal team over the last 2 decades.
Look, there's a lot of question around, how long this case has taken. There's been a lot of what feels like bureaucratic wrangling in the country's courts, postponement after postponement. Every time we cover the story, it's a pre-trial hearing. But if we look at the past 10, 15 years, Hennie, there are some sort of good moments that stand out, particularly if we look at the Sariti Commission that was overturned, what that says about our institutions in holding other institutions like commissions of inquiry accountable?
Absolutely. I think, Michelle, for us to recognize that we do have institutions that can make a difference in our country. I was sitting in the Zondo Commission last night, listening to Judge Zondo and the way in which they're dealing with issues around money flows now and comparing it to the cover-up that was Judge Siriti's Arms Deal Commission that frankly acted almost completely in favor of Jacob Zuma and the arms companies. Justice Siriti's shameful conduct related to that finding of his commission being overturned in court. And I think, the point here is to recognize the powerful interests that stand outside of the courtroom. There are very few countries in the world, and particularly countries the size of ours, who have even attempted to prosecute global arms companies for corruption, never mind the involvement of a former head of state. The fact that we are even still in this process of trying to obtain justice is in itself quite extraordinary. And it's quite extraordinary when you know that in many countries there's a simple trade-off. Big companies like Thales, partly state-owned, would simply call the head of state of the country and say, let this matter, drop this matter. That hasn't happened. We know the French government has announced a massive investment in South African economy recently. And those negotiations, I'm not saying they are in this instance, but in most countries are often tied with the desire to get big companies like Thales off scot-free. And we haven't seen that happen. So I think it does show a strength and robustness of our institutions and certainly of civil society, and the media continues to shine a light on these issues. It's the kind of thing that big corporations and politicians don't like very much. And if that at least makes them squirm until justice is arrived at, then I think it's incredibly important for society to continue to do that.
Yeah. I mean, Hennie, just in terms of the Siriti Commission and its findings, as you've outlined them to us now, Judge Mlambo and the other judges that made this assessment lambasted the entire commission for its failure to interrogate those witnesses who were implicated, to really interrogate them in a substantial way. Insofar as what Mlambo had to say, at what stage do we get to a point where we also pursue charges against the people who were involved in that commission?
Yeah, well, I think, Michelle, that is crucial because otherwise, it's the concern about this becoming precedent. There are supposed to be senior staff members within that commission, one of whom, the former spokesperson, has gone to become a very senior person within GCIS and is very well paid by the South African state. So there are questions around people like those involvement. But importantly, the organization where I work, Open Secrets, together with Shadow World Investigations, brought complaints to the Judicial Services Commission earlier this year against the conduct of Judges Siriti and Musi, and we are told that the Chief Justice's office is looking at the matter. We anticipate the Chief Justice's office to deal with this expeditiously, and that ultimately what needs to be brought is we need to see Judge Siriti appear before his peers in the Judicial Service Commission and the other members there, and be held to account for that shameful conduct. If there was a low point, one of the low points in the judiciary in the last 20 years, I think 25 years of democracy, it certainly was the Siriti Commission of Inquiry.
Yeah, Judge Mlambo, pardon me, in his decision there, saying the Commission's willful ignorance of important documentation that implicated many of those questioned. Some scathing words made in that decision there. Hennie, thanks very much for your time, as always, coming on to the AM report.